church? Hell no. Are you no longer feeling comfortable in church? This podcast is for individuals who are desperately missing God, but don't know how to find Him. Substance abuse, domestic violence, sex offenses, acrimonious divorce can contribute to discomfort in the church. For these individuals, church is just not an option anymore. Ordained minister Dennis Hall and his guests invite you to listen to this podcast for topics that are inspiring, uplifting, and will bring hope to those who just feel church is not relevant in their lives today.
I'm Dr. Dennis Hall, and I'm delighted that you're listening to our podcast today, and I'm even more delighted to have my good friend Ham Gadd on with us today, a fellow journeyer in this life of challenges and a fellow believer. We're delighted to have you here today, Ham.
That's my pleasure. Totally.
Good. You know, just a few days ago, as we all know, because it's been in the news, there was a woman killed in Minneapolis by the immigration officers who apparently was blocking the officers from carrying out their duties. And it's an unfortunate, tragic accident. I don't even want to call it an accident, but it's an event that occurred because a police officer was run over and hospitalized as a result of her actions, and weapons were fired, and she lost her life. And after that, though, a reporter found her ex-father-in-law to interview him to find out what kind of a woman this woman was. It turns out her father-in-law was a fervent Christian man, and he not only talked about his this woman who was killed, but in the course of that interview, he shared some things about his faith and shared the fact that he had had a near-death experience about 30 years ago that changed his entire life, and that was the starting point for his journey in Christianity. And so it caused me to think, you know what? From time to time, we hear these stories about someone who's had a near-death experience, and it comes up all the time. And some people, I think, just scoff at them, and others are fascinated by them, and others are, I think, even moved and motivated by hearing about them. And the reason I wanted to have my good friend Ham on today is he's a person who experienced a near-death experience and has spoken publicly about it. And I thought today, in light of this news story of this former father-in-law, it might be a good day to pause and just talk about this phenomena, a near-death experience. People estimate that there may be as many as 68 million people in the United States that's had a near-death experience, and with that number, there are people all around us. And Matt, I'm delighted you're here today, and I would like to invite you to sort of tell our listening audience how this began with you.
Certainly. Well, I appreciate being here and being able to share my story. I was living in Atlanta and had a kind of a heart murmur, atrial fibrillation, AFib. And so wound up having some preliminary CAT scan and some additional tests, and it highlighted that I had a very large aneurysm that was located above my heart, about the size of a golf ball, pretty good size. And so it was not leaking, but my cardiologist was concerned enough that he wanted me to get that tended to. And so we had some additional tests, and this would have been like May, June of 2023. And so the additional test kind of highlighted I had 3 other things that needed to be fixed in the heart. So we scheduled a heart surgery down in downtown Atlanta at Piedmont Hospital, which was outstanding, top-notch medical facility. And my heart surgeon had kind of given me the overview as to what he was going to be doing and how it was going to go. And I remember having a whole lot of paperwork to sign my name to, with all the disclosures and all the potential side effects and whatnot. But this was my very first operation, and I did not have any anticipation that I was going to have the experience that I had. And he basically told me and told my wife and son who were there that this was going to be a 4 to 5 hour procedure. And then once I came out of anesthesia, and then I'd be into a recovery area and they could see me, et cetera, et cetera. Well, as it turned out, the actual operation itself went fine. There were no issues, no problems, and everything was done exactly the way it should have been. And so at the end of the surgery, and it was open chest because of the location of the aneurysm. It was not an option to go up through the groin, which is very typical for a lot of surgeries now. So anyway, I had a open chest, and they closed me back up and put me into a recovery room. And that's where things kind of went sideways. And
Or downhill. Yeah.
as my surgeon said, I said that's where I ran off the road.
You're right.
But I started experiencing multiple cardiac arrests, and they were doing the usual things that you would do with a heart patient that is experiencing an arrest, with defibrillation and CPR and all of those kind of exterior things. And unfortunately, I was not able to hold a steady heartbeat. And so they had initially declared what's called a code blue, which is a hospital term for
Right.
we got problems.
That's right.
Yeah. So my heart, my lung, and my brain function all just kind of flatlined for a short period of time. And then they were able to bring me back. And then I basically crashed again for an extended period of time. And it was that second event, the second code blue, that I had a sensation that I had breathed my last breath and went to almost total darkness, nothingness. But it was very shortly followed by a feeling of ascension and going towards a tunnel that started very dark and then increasing lights the further I went out. And it's hard to put a time reference on that, Dennis, as to, if that journey was 10 seconds or 2 minutes. But
Did you have a sense of consciousness, maybe even a consciousness that's above what we experience here on Earth?
well, I think, and it was my spirit. I mean, it was not my body that was ascending. It was my spirit. And I did have the consciousness to see the lights and to experience ever increasing light and the feeling of rising. And so after that short journey, I arrived in heaven, and it was bathed in unbelievable light. Um,
What caused you to think it was heaven?
because
Then
because I wasn't rising anymore.
you had reached a destination,
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah. I was. That was, but at the time, again, I had a very clear image of Jesus, and he was standing in front of me, and he was pictured uh, just as we see him in the Bible, with kind of a long, flowing robe, long, brownish hair, had his arms open to me, very welcoming, and I sensed that he was indicating that I was welcome, but just not yet. And that was the thing that just kind of, you know, I I knew that it was not my time, and I did not, unfortunately, I didn't ask for a tour, or, yeah,
Right.
but when he said that I was welcomed, just not yet, I knew that at some point in the future, and that is entirely in the Lord's time frame, um, that I would be welcome to come back. And but it was one of those conflicting moments where, our ultimate glory destination is heaven. But I had not, uh, in any way whatsoever, wished any of my family or friends goodbye, because I was fully expecting to be
Right.
on normal surgery, that I was going to wake up and
Right.
everything was fixed.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those situations where uh, I was deeply conflicted, not wanting to leave, but realizing that if Jesus was sending me back, then my work back here on earth was not done, and that I was going to be fully back to life. And so I wound up, going down the tunnel again, and I'm, I I kind of believe that it was the confluence, or the exact moment when I went back into my body, when my spirit went back into my body, was kind of the last uh, medical procedure that the doctors employed, which at that time was a open chest heart massage.
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
And so and if I had a large embolism, which was basically blocking the blood flow to my heart and brain and lungs. And so when my surgeon got that worked out, and when I came back into my body, and at the same time, I've got to mention that my wife and my son were very, very seriously praying for my recovery. And it was, I think, the combination of those three things all kind of at the same time. Uh, Jesus sending me back, my doctor getting my heart to pump and operate the way it should, and my wife and son's very fervent, intense prayers. So now, having said all that, I was still unconscious, and I was in a cardiac care recovery area, intensive care, for a couple of days. And I I had all kinds of tubes and whatnot. So I couldn't communicate with anyone. And they kind of brought me out of my sedated, semi-conscious state. And that they had a major concern that I was had a stroke, and so was going to lose mobility as far as movement. Right. And the doctors were saying, "Well, can you move your fingers?" And I did. "Can you move your toes?" And I did that. And but I made a motion with my hand, like wanting to write. And they brought me a little dry erase board with a magic marker. And the very first thing I wrote was that I saw Jesus. And, and then after that, as my physical healing was coming along, I wrote out a whole bunch more things. But
Could you tell how people reacted when you said, "I saw Jesus"?
oh, they were, and tell me more. Tell me, and what does he look like? What does he sound like? And it was, if it is one of those experiences that I have always felt I would be incredibly selfish and sad if I did not share this particular experience, because I think people are thirsting for, what is heaven?
Oh, there's no question in my mind. I mean, a lot of times in counseling, I get asked those questions, or somebody just finds out that I'm an ordained minister. They want to talk about that subject. The fact of the matter is that there have been enough people who've experienced this where there have been extensive study. I mean, there have been, oh gosh, I don't know how many, but just dozens of books written by people who've had a near-death experience, or by doctors and researchers who put together a compilation of hundreds of patients who've had that experience. And so we have a lot of data, and what that data has produced. I mean, we have been numerous articles written by researchers that have appeared in peer-reviewed medical journals, some of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, about these experiences. And what they've learned is a lot of things that you're sharing in your experience, that across the board, uh, the people who've experienced this have very similar things to say. Like they talk about a heightened sense of consciousness where they're absolutely certain that these things occur,
Right.
that there's no doubt in their mind that these things occur, and that they encounter this brilliant light. They have this sense of going through a tunnel, and and really have a sense that they're in this heavenly realm, like you say. And so when you read about all these different people having this same kind of experience, it begins to it begins to confirm that these are real experiences that these people have had. And
I've got no doubt.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, and this thing you described about aware of a decision to return, that you and Jesus were making at the same time. Well, here across the board, this is what people are reporting who've had these near-death experiences. Now, not everybody has all the same experiences. I know you and I've talked about this before, and that is a lot of these people have these out-of-body experiences where they feel like they were literally in the room while the clinicians and others were working on them, and they could see and know everything that was going on, even though they had been completely sedated. Now, you didn't have that, did you?
no, in the operating room itself, um, everything went the way that they expected, and there were no issues. I did not have any kind of a problem until I was in recovery. So I was out of the surgical theater, if you would. Uh, but one of the things that we wound up doing a few weeks after my surgery, and when I was having, I guess, my first follow up appointment with my surgeon, is some church friends of ours had found a picture online of Jesus standing in the operating room, um, right next to the head surgeon with his hand on his shoulder and showing him where to operate. So we got this particular picture blown up and framed, and I gave that to our surgeon, who is a believer, and he indicated to me that he has that in his office, and every single time before he goes for a operation, he prays.
What that's wonderful.
And I
That's part of what
and
happens, I think.
I mean, he readily acknowledges that that what I went through, he did everything that he knew how to do medically and surgically, but he readily admits that he had help,
Right.
and that was a good Lord.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, there are people out there, including some physicians, who are skeptics about near death experiences, and they will attribute this experience to, excess CO2 in the bloodstream can affect people, in a way that they might see a bright light or a tunnel, or they'll say, well, it could have been a lack of oxygen that can lead to hallucinations and even cause one to think they're seeing loved ones or angels or Jesus, et cetera, et cetera. And so they have all of these things, and even say, well, it could have been a reaction to the anesthesia that caused all of this. And and as I've read some of the skeptics things, uh, my impression is they're just grasping at straws, and they're grasping at straws because any one of these events would not produce the kind of comprehensive experience that you had or others have had with near-death experiences.
Right. No, I think, and again, I described it as a confluence of medical expertise and technology with intentional prayer kind of underlaying that. But over everything was the good Lord. And
Right.
he had told me, real clear, I mean, I was welcome, but just not yet.
Not your time. It caused me to think about those scriptures that tell us that God has numbered our days even before we're born. I mean, we're programmed to leave this earth on His timetable, not ours, and nothing will cause us to leave earlier than He has planned or later than He has planned. It's very interesting. A guy by the name of Dr. Jeffrey Long, who's a practicing radiation oncologist in Kentucky, wrote a book several years ago that was entitled Evidence of the Afterlife, the Science of Near-Death Experiences, where he had studied hundreds of patients who had had near-death experiences in a very sort of scientific way. In fact, those who looked at his book have said, his scientific approach to this was very sound. But he addresses some of these things where people might question the someone's near-death experience, where he'll say that near-death experiences generally when you as a group categorize them, They have the same consistent and logical order across all age groups, across all genders, literally around the world. People are having the similar kinds of experiences. So to I mean, I don't think there's a psychologist out there who would say, well, all these literally millions of people around the world are having the same hallucination. It just don't occur that way.
No, no, I mean, there's a lot of and I've read some books and seen some Christian movies, and a lot of commonality regarding um, NDEs, near-death experiences. But they can be from a whole variety of different regions of the world, different causes of death, different experiences. But there's a number of things that are very, very similar. And going to the light, as we say, is fairly common. Going essentially a tunnel shaft of light that is ascending.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, because there's some that descend.
That's right.
That's a different.
That's right. And there are some people who had a near-death experience who have reported that in their experiences they got a glimpse of hell,
Right.
and which is a very different kind of experience than you had, and it's certainly not the most common near-death experience at all. But that does happen, and we hear from those people, and on the way to the studio today, you and I were talking about this, and it's one of the compelling things when you begin to talk about near-death experiences is the people who've been totally blind since birth. And they experience the same things you experience, and that is this going to light and seeing this blinding light and seeing people in heaven and biblical characters in heaven and family people in heaven that they can describe in great detail as they come back to their earthly life.
Well, and I have read in one of the couple of things that I did not have happen to me was the out of body experience where you're floating kind of on the ceiling and you're looking down uh, on your operation or on your body, and I did not experience that, but I was already out of surgery. So
Yeah.
and then the review of your life story, and seeing relatives. But those are the things when I think I'll have maybe a longer trip next time.
Yeah, you
Could be the permanent trip.
Well, that's right. And of course, one of the reassuring things for believers is when we hear stories like yours and others, it alleviates some uh, anxiety about death in terms of what we're going to experience in death, and how what a peaceful, wonderful transition it will be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I did not when I had breathed my last breath, and everything was total darkness, total silence, total void, if you would. But that was followed fairly quickly on light and ascension. So it was not like I was stuck in a void for an extended period of time. And I think that would be the resurrection hope that I would like to share with folks is that you're not going to be
Right.
you. It'll happen fairly rapidly.
Right.
At least it did for me.
Well, and I think, gosh, I guess in my ministry, I would say I can't tell you how many times that I've talked to somebody about death and really tell them, well, as a believer, you're really not going to experience death. You're just going to transition.
Right.
You're just going to transition from this earthly life into this heavenly realm. You're not going to experience death. And so then when we hear the stories of people who have had death experiences, it absolutely confirms that that is exactly what's going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say part of the, if you would, the agreement with Jesus when when I came back was that things were going to change because I had what I would call a changed heart, with all the physical repairs and the rebuilding and the restoring. And I would like to think of it as a revival. Uh, but with the change of the physical structure of the heart, I think it is more pertinent to be able to show how does that manifest itself. Uh, your your attitudes, your actions uh, are hopefully going to show the character and the attributes and the nature of Jesus. So you get away from the selfish and you get away from the duplicitous and a lot of the negative things that we learned here on earth. And hopefully you get into those actions and things that express love and gentleness and peace.
Right. Right. The um, you're talking about probably the thing that is the most convincing thing about near-death experiences. So it's true, people could have hallucination, and it's true that you know oxygen issues and anesthesia issues and everything else can cause certain things that are similar to a near-death experience. The big difference is, and what most of the researchers will say, the thing that none of those things do is cause a transformation in a person's life, like you're describing.
Right.
And then what we hear over and over again from people with the near-death experiences is it has transformed them in an unbelievable kind of way.
Well, if it doesn't, then
Nothing's
you
going
got
to.
you got another problem.
That's exactly right. You got another problem, and when we read all this, I mean, when we read about even another thing I think grabs me is the children who've had near death experiences. When they will report that they've met some family member who died many years before they were even born and can talk about their conversation in detail and describe them in detail where everybody in the family says, this must have happened because this child never saw this person. That's exactly how they looked. It's exactly how they talked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think as I maybe had mentioned, it's about my second, uh, what they call code blue, which was more longer period of time. And I think the doctor told me it was about 7, 8 minutes. So I've kind of accepted that that's the time that I was in the ascension, the light, heaven, back. Now, as to how long I spent up there, I did not have a watch. That's,
That's right.
Jesus does,
Well, yes, and even to talk about time, I mean that's a very interesting subject because time in heaven is totally different than time on earth, and so you're exactly right. He had the timepiece, and he could have expanded the time that was spent with you in a way that we would have a difficult time understanding here on earth in terms of the way we deal with time and how we measure time on earth.
Right.
It's just it's amazing to read and hear about all these different experiences, and you know these family reunions. That's what I'll call family reunions
Yeah.
that take place with people having these experiences where you didn't experience that, where some people are there uh, talking with family members that they knew who've gone on into heaven, and all of a sudden they're there. It sort of confirms the awareness that we have that we're going to be able to recognize people in heaven. The Bible teaches that. Everyone was able to recognize Jesus after he was resurrected, and in the same way, and even recognized others in terms of different biblical scenes. So it's a confirmation again of biblical teaching about what heaven is really like.
Right. I mean, it was just bathed in a light that I had never experienced on earth. Uh, and it was beautiful,
Yeah.
as was Jesus. I mean, he was,
And isn't it interesting that blind people who have had a near-death experience say the same thing you're saying?
yeah,
Who've never seen light on this earth.
Yeah.
You know.
I like I say, I did not request a tour, but I figure that'll come in the Lord's time when He wants me back.
Well, sure it will. And as we talk, you kind of alluded to this earlier when you were talking about uh, people who, what are we taught about heaven? I mean, we're taught that heaven is available to everyone. That the scripture teaches us that all we have to do is believe and trust Jesus as a Lord and Savior to have a personal relationship with Him. That's all it takes.
Right.
But at the same time, the scripture tells us that although the highway is wide, the gate is narrow, meaning that there will be a lot of people who just reject Jesus, reject biblical teaching, reject what He's asking us to do is in this lifetime, and they won't have that experience.
Yeah. Well, and again, my surgeon, uh, who was an incredibly talented heart surgeon, one of the best in Atlanta, and he readily acknowledged that he did all that he knew how to do, but it was if all we had to do was just rely on the medical experience without having any prayer or Jesus, I wouldn't be here.
Right. Exactly. It's just amazing to me that we have. It's almost like Jesus has chosen another method to spread His message, and the method He's chosen is near-death experiences.
Yes. Well, and as I had said, I mean, if you don't share that, then I don't know. You really kind of need to re-examine your why you're here.
Yep.
Because it is important for people to not necessarily fear death, because it's something that we all will face. But what comes after death, right? And pretty quickly comes after, and it's wonderful.
That's right.
Beautiful.
That's right. And that's the message that people who experience this spread. It's this thing that spreads. Now, uh, it's fascinating to me is, there are a lot of people who go through a near-death experience who don't have uh, happen to them what happened to you. By that I mean there are people who have to be resuscitated in the hospital, and people who flatline and the doctors have to rescue from death's door, who don't experience what you experience. It's fascinating to me just to ask that question we don't have an answer to, and that is why do certain people experience this and others don't. And I'll tell you what my conviction is. My conviction is, God chooses those people to have the experience you had because He knows that when they return, they will contribute to the expansion of His kingdom in ways that other people would not.
Well, I was a strong believer going in. So I've been a devout Christian my whole adult life. And so, but this was almost like a supercharge.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the thing with really almost across the board, the most convincing thing is that when you look at just thousands of people who've experienced this, the one commonality is they are a transformed person.
Right.
Their lives have been transformed. And well, I wanted to get you on here today and talk about this and talk about your experience and just talk about near death experiences today. And let me just say, I want to thank you for being here, Ham, and I want to thank our listeners for listening to us today. And as we begin to wind this podcast down, let me say to our listeners, if this has not kind of rattled your cage a little bit, and it doesn't say to you that it's time for me to either renew my relationship with Jesus or it's time for me to ask the question in my life, is it time for me to have a relationship with Jesus? Of course, what Ham and I will both tell you, it's time. It's time. And may God bless you as you ask those questions. And again, thank you for listening to us.
Thank you, Dennis.